Hi, and welcome to another Street Fight Politics. We're happy to have you back. Street Fight Politics because sending Trump home was just the beginning of our job, and because Mitch McConnell just showed you who he is again. So I'd like to introduce my co-host tonight and every night, Ed Westerfield. You know, Ed's a guy that during the day he will put you to sleep, but after dark he is on fire.
Oh, we're going to prove that tonight too.
That's right. And our other co-host is Harry Ramsbottom. He's a buttoned-up military man with a heart about the size of Houston.
That's lovely.
Oh, in medicine, that's not a good idea. So you don't want your heart to be that big.
I had enough with the enlarged heart jokes, Doc. Let's talk about President-elect Joe Biden. Holy cow. Something we did worked.
You know, and we called it. We did. We said it was going to be long and ugly, but we called it a week ago tonight. And I just want to say,
the thing is you've got to give a lot of props to a lot of different groups. It's like I've got a lot of black friends, especially in Atlanta, that, I mean, they were literally, what they spent was shoe leather. They were out in the ground game, getting the voters out. And it made a difference. I mean, when you compare the 2016 numbers to the 2020 numbers, you know, that made the difference. You know, it didn't overcome, the Senate races. And we'll talk about those a little later. But, you know, there were a lot of groups that deserve a lot of credit for this.
Amen.
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole country was rowing in the same direction, which is not common.
No.
All the way from, you know, the South to the West, you know, Arizona, we're all, you know, fans of Arizona, and it's such a nice thing to see that going Joe Biden's way, even though it's not official yet. You know, the entire Northeast and the firewall, the Great Lakes firewall of Wisconsin and Minnesota or Michigan and Pennsylvania.
Well, I want to talk about that right there, Jimmy, is because, you know, 20 years ago, yeah, it's a firewall. You didn't have to worry about those states. Mm-hmm. You have to worry about those states. You know, those, if they're dammed, there's water, Republican water getting ready to crest over them. I mean, you know, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, I mean, they were all too close to call till what? Just, 2 days ago.
Well,
right. So, looking at that as something that, you can put in your back pocket. I don't think so. I mean, that's something that, yeah, you can probably keep this blue, but you're working to do it. I mean,
you're going to have to earn it.
You're going to have to earn
it. In the situation of Wisconsin, though, the only reason that exists is because of voter suppression.
Correct.
You know, Wisconsin was one of the crucibles of voter suppression.
Well, that and the gerrymandering. I mean, it's like the Democrats own 60% of the voters and have 40% of the legislators in Wisconsin. I mean,
yeah. And for the last 40 years, we've been given workers the convenient untruth that their jobs were replaced by jobs moving overseas or by overseas people coming here, when in fact the vast majority of those factory workers' jobs were stopped by automation.
Yeah.
For example, one GM plant, they went from 24 people working in the paint department to 3 before the plant closed.
Yeah. I think as joyful as we all are and should be about the results of this election, the reality is that, as Wellington said after Waterloo, it was a damn close run thing. And we are going to have to continue earning it moving forward. And I don't want to blow the surprise about talking about Georgia here later in the segment, but it ain't over. I mean, we've got a lot to fight. The war.
Well, and again, I mean, I look at it's not only over. I'm much more sanguine than that. When you look at the numbers, we were expecting the blue wave, and what we got was a blue mirage. We didn't, except for Biden winning, and Kelly here in Arizona, Hickenlooper in Colorado. Democrats actually lost. I mean, we didn't pick up any state houses, no governors. We're losing congressmen. And we picked up, one senator, but, this idea is that, we looked like we were going to knock off Joni Ernst. We were going to knock off Tom Tillis. We were going to knock off Lady G in South Carolina. Had this fantasy that, that Mitch McConnell was in play and, on and on and on. And that's not what happened. I mean, even when you get here in Arizona, we managed to turned the presidential vote in Maricopa County blue, but the rest of the races all went to Republicans. Every last one.
So that's a really key point, Ed. And I want to point this out as a guy who actually ran for a state legislature, the Arizona state legislature, in one of the reddest districts in the state. People, the voters, God bless them, they get the importance of the presidency. They kind of get the importance of Congress and the Senate, but they totally gloss over the really important ones to their daily lives, and that is the state and the local elections. And you cannot continue to vote blue at the top and red at the bottom and think you're going to get any significant change in your daily life. They're the ones who run your education budgets. They're the ones who fix your roads. They're the ones who provide all those daily things that you complain about but never do anything about by voting differently.
Well, what we saw is that the vast majority of people didn't want that to change. They didn't want their lives to change. They just wanted to be rid of Trump. And even, Trump increased his margin or increased his voter turnout. So it wasn't even, a lot of people wanted to keep Trump and keep their local government.
Well, what we had like a Secretariat race. I mean, it's like the old saw was the horse that finished second and the Derby and the Preakness was the fastest horse of all time, except for the fact that Secretariat won. And you look at Trump's numbers, he got 71 million voters to vote for him nationwide, which was the most votes for any presidential candidate in U.S. history, except for Biden, who got 74 this time. So, it's not like these 71 million voters.
That's just him hanging on to something to say he didn't lose, though. I mean, the idea that Trump got the second most votes, it doesn't matter because he lost.
Yeah.
And he lost.
The guy who won got the most votes.
Well, but I mean, it's like you look at it.
But he lost by a bigger margin than he beat Hillary.
Right.
By about twice.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing to think about, we were all, I think, disappointed after Election Day. We were happy that we got rid of the scourge of Trump. And it was apparent to, I think, all of us on Wednesday, if you looked at the tea leaves, that it would end up this way on Friday or Saturday. So we were all counting on Trump being thrown out of office. Which I'm still waiting for the moment when that happens. I may have told you about my Vuvuzela plan. We're all going to get together with Vuvuzelas and go down to the White House. And when he's walking out to the helicopter, we're going to make sure he hears us.
Oh, that would be awesome.
But the other thing that happened, the important thing that happened here is we did what we set out to do, which is get the nation through another democratic election until the voting population changes. Now, we're going to see 4 years from now, and especially 8 years from now, we're going to have a completely different electorate than we have had in the last 20 years.
Totally. I think, and this is a prediction, and it's an optimistic one, but I think what we're going to see is that these youngsters, the Generation Z who voted for the very first time, et cetera, once they got a taste of the power of that, I don't think they'll ever go back. I think there's going to be like the 1930s voters who voted for Roosevelt the first time and became regular, steady voters ever since that time.
Right.
And that's, again, a prediction and a very hopeful one.
Yes. And there are two things we know about. Once somebody donates to a campaign, they're going to vote. We know that they will show up and vote.
Once they donate to a campaign, they will never lose track of their Social Security number.
And the other thing we know is once the young person votes for the first time, then from then on, they are a voter.
Yeah.
So to have a big pool of young people come in this time means that we got a little jump start. We did.
Yeah. Well, and it's actually going out and finding those voters and, coming up with new ways to do it that you got to do. It's like last night I was talking with Christina in Texas, and they've come up with the idea of going to quinceañeras and doing voter drives at the quinceañeras in Texas, which I just thought, man, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
And they literally have.
I can't wait till the Texas Attorney General hears that.
But the thing is, though, you're reaching your voters. There's typically a lot of people that haven't signed up, and they have the little girl who's turning 15 make a speech saying, that when I'm 18, I'm going to vote. And, it's like, Jesus Christ, why didn't I think of that? That is like just brilliant.
It is a good idea.
Yeah.
You have to meet people where they are. I mean, the Souls to the Polls thing started because of Democratic outreach to black churches. It was a kind of organic thing that happened. But now social to the polls is a big part of our get out the vote strategy, and that's one of the things they keep trying to gerrymander.
And it's
if you
clearly
remember
worked
right,
in places like Georgia.
right? If you remember right in the last election where the police stopped a bus full of people that was going to the polls because they were black. That's why they stopped them. But the idea was that it's against the law for you to drive somebody else to the polls or drive a group of people to the polls. Well, what a ridiculous
Well, I mean, that's the ballot
and not
harvesting
true
laws.
thing. It wasn't even true that that's against the law.
Right. And honestly, we have been doing this in the Democratic Party for years, where we have sent buses to black churches on election day, and really integrating that soulful aspect with the political aspect, and so have the Republicans.
Right.
Well,
I think that's true. I mean,
what I'm actually advocating for is to go to a system nationwide that we all do like Arizona does and vote by mail.
I think we have crossed that bridge. I mean, really, realistically, a lot of people, I don't know what the final is going to be, but let's just say that 30+% of America voted by mail this time. I don't think we're turning back.
Well, I mean, it's like the first time I did it. It's like you sit down at your kitchen table, you're going over it. And so, you've got your, the big wins, you've already made up your mind, but then you're getting into all the weeds with all these propositions and county commissioners that, I mean, like literally they'll be pick 3 of 6 names. And it's like 1, 2, 3 for you. Literally you're voting randomly. You don't know. It's like,
that's true.
I like his name. Now that sounds like he'd make a good commissioner. And, that gives you time to at least sit down and do, some research if you want. They send out these booklets that people get to make their statements. So to me it is so convenient. Lets you do it truly in private. There's no rush, and I think you make better decisions doing that.
Well, here's how I think that's going to play out. Here's the development of that going forward will be, if they can do it, why can't I do it? And some of these states where it's used as a form of voter suppression are going to face blowback because they're not providing the same level of convenience and services to voters in that
That's
state.
a great point, Jimmy, because that actually happened
Arizona.
here in Arizona, because the Republicans were going to try to do something to turn back the vote by mail, and the seniors over in Sun City went berserk. And it wasn't the Democrats, it was the Republicans over in Sun City that said, no, you're not going to be doing that, or you're not going to be in office.
80% of Arizona has been voting for mail by mail for decades. I mean, that's just the way we do it there.
Successfully doing it. Yeah. And like every other instance in the entire nation, there's no voter fraud. The only voter fraud is voter suppression. That's the only voter fraud.
I completely agree.
Keeping legitimate people from voting because you say you're trying to keep people who aren't entitled to vote from voting. That's voter fraud.
So here's the other thing. We talked about this 2 weeks ago, and that is that when you do it this way, when I'm able to vote at the end of July or August or whatever the date is, this totally obviates the idea of an October surprise. I mean, it just...
And we saw that this time.
We absolutely did. By the time Giuliani, did his thing. I was going to say something very rude, but did his thing. It not only fell flat, but it was just irrelevant.
Right. They tried to get the Hunter Biden thing going again. That fell flat. I mean, I think that, that was a stupid move because obviously that was completely aired during the impeachment hearings. And whether or not you thought Trump should be impeached, you knew that the Hunter Biden story was a bunch of BS. So trying to revive that was just dumb. Trump doesn't do anything original. He's tried to run the same playbook he ran last time, which only worked because people didn't really know him. Now that people know him, he didn't have a chance with that playbook.
No, it's only almost as dumb as holding your final news conference between a porn shop and a crematorium.
That is
if you don't know, the thing we're dancing around here is that the Trump campaign wanted to have a press conference with Rudy Giuliani where he was going to air new and salacious claims about voter fraud, and instead of booking the Four Seasons, they accidentally booked a place called Four Seasons Total Landscaping, which looks like you might think a landscaping business would look.
Did.
It's a rundown old garage
And sacks of shit.
next to a porn shop with live
And a
viewing.
crematorium
And a
across the
crematorium.
other way.
So poignantly ironic, I would
And the
call it.
prison was like a half a mile down the street, too. Let's not forget that. So.
And their chief witness was a child molester.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right.
I mean,
and this is this is what I learned from Jason Stanley, an expert on authoritarianism and fascism that I interviewed. Is fascists always hire based on loyalty, so they never get competence. The criteria they're looking for is somebody who will follow orders and listen to them, not
Are you
somebody who
saying
will do a
that
good
somebody
job in whatever
booking
the job is.
the Four Seasons landscaping business was incompetent?
So some press aide couldn't even book a hotel competently. You know, somebody's nephew or something, I'm sure.
Well, honest to God, who the hell wants to work for the Trump campaign at this point? I can honestly tell you. So I work literally a block away from the Trump campaign headquarters, and those people looked like death warmed over for the past week and a half. They knew shit was coming down. I shared a story about a young woman buying a coffee at Starbucks and saying maybe it'll keep the tears away. I mean, they knew this was happening. And,
right.
and oh, by the way, news story today is that a bunch, and I don't know the exact number, but a bunch of people at the RNC have been dismissed summarily because they don't have the money, and they need the money to fight for Georgia.
Right. Yeah, well, we're seeing all kinds of ramifications of the election in that regard. You know, the White House personnel director has said that anyone who starts looking for a job now should be fired. You know, what is wrong with
the Department of Defense? I'm just wondering, you know, where are they going to?
Well, it seems like that's what's, you know, happening.
Well, that's the whole thing is right now that people aren't getting offers because you put that you're in the Trump White House on your resume, and it's toxic. I mean, in fact, they're calling it the Trump taint.
Well,
and the same thing has been true on dating websites from the beginning of the Trump administration. Yeah. The people that work in the Trump administration don't have dating opportunities in the larger Washington, and in fact, many people's dating profiles say no Trumpers.
So I don't want to destroy a relationship with my employer, but professionally, I find jobs for people in D.C. That's what I do. And that's entirely true. I mean, that is the
executive job.
Oh, yeah. We're talking. I had a discussion today with a gentleman who makes $500,000 a year, if that gives you an indication. And nobody really wants to put that out there. And everybody was holding their breath for the past week or so. And most of them here in D.C. were really relieved. I'll just say that.
Right. And, the indication it gives me is big commission. If the guy's making $500,000.
Well, Mr. Smith, we noticed this 4-year gap in your resume history. What was going on from 2016 to 2020?
That's right. What were you doing in the last
4 year?
Well,
nobody's worked for him for 4 years. So
there is that. That's the good thing. So yeah.
The people who've already gotten fired are probably the lucky ones.
It is very true, though. I mean, and again, here in D.C., where I work, that is overwhelmingly so. Fun story. I was on my way downtown on Saturday when the news broke out. We drove down Connecticut Avenue straight to BLM Plaza. We got there less than 30 minutes or so after the announcement. It was like Mardi Gras without the beads. I mean, everyone was happy. Everyone. It was just, and I posted a video on our page. So if you wanted to see what it looked like, that was it. About 2 minutes of just the crowd going nuts. I took it all the way down to the fence line there at Lafayette Park in front of the church where Trump held his Bible upside down. It was phenomenal, and the energy was
just outside of Saddam's compound.
Yeah, yes, I took it to the fence line.
Yeah,
and you can see that there. Honest to God, if we just stayed there 30 more minutes, they're the naked people. It was that kind of fun thing, and. Good God, as we were walking there, people were high-fiving each other and saying, we won.
And I read the story about the impromptu parade that you found yourself involved in. Maybe you can talk about that for a second.
Well, true story. So we heard the announcement. We turned left on Connecticut Avenue to head downtown. We're by the National Zoo. And I'm trying to just give people landmarks so they can look at it on a map. But we're less than a couple of miles away from BLM Plaza and McPherson Square. And we got to a point where the traffic had slowed down substantially, and we're trying to get around it because, everybody's going downtown. And of course, flags are breaking out. I mean, it's spontaneous eruptions of joy that you just can't plan. People have just ran out in the middle of their, from their front doors. And we passed this pickup truck, and sure enough, there's a 4 or 5 piece brass band with a big fat guy with a tuba, blowing on it, and they're just playing. And I mean, at this point, who gives a shit whether we're getting slowed or not? We're all just in this collective bubble of joy. And I know Ed had a different experience in downtown Phoenix, but here in DC, it was nothing but fun and happiness and relief and joy and tears. I cried the entire time. I posted a picture of myself on my own personal page because, I don't want everybody out there seeing it. But yeah, it was just that kind of feeling. And I was emotional the entire day. I probably broke down 20 times that day.
Well, I look at it from this standpoint, I mean, as a country, we walked up to the edge of the abyss and looked over and stared down in it, and we managed to pull back from the abyss. But I mean, we're not out of the woods.
Well, I think that's the next thing we ought to talk about. Is we feel like that to me, we won the biggest battle, but we didn't win the war yet. We are still in danger of slipping into autocracy. I think that the nuclear clock in this regard, the autocracy clock, has pulled back quite a bit, but we're not done yet. We still have a Republican Party that's made up of liars, cheats, and thieves, and we're still in that situation where everybody wants to turn and start cooperating and all that. And frankly, don't do it.
Well, the Republicans have already said we're not going to lift a finger to help you. They've already,
Joe Biden's job is to be the president of everybody.
Right.
But your job is not to be the voter of everybody. Your job is not to be a conciliator. Your job is to keep fighting for the things we believe in. There's a lot of, unfinished business now that we can start to finish, but we are not finished. And among those things are police brutality and institutional racism and Christian authoritarians attempting to make you follow their religious beliefs. And, we still need to take back the Senate. You guys got some other stuff?
No, well, I want to talk about the Senate. I think you just brought it up right there because that is the next fight. That is the big thing. And, for all of us who do not live in Georgia, it's easy to say, well, that's their thing. It is not. We have 2 seats left in play in the Senate. Those 2 seats would make a 50-50 split between the Democrats and the Republicans. Understanding that the Vice President of America is the president of the Senate and casts the deciding vote in any tie, that means that with Kamala Harris as the vice president, thank God, and 50 senators, we would win. Most things we would win. So here we are with Georgia with a contested election. I'm not going to go over the math because I don't have a whiteboard and I'm not Chris Matthews, but and I can.
Steve Kornacki, I think is what you're talking about.
No,
Chris Matthews is having cocktails.
Yeah. Well, I remember him very well. Anyway, so no, the point is that if you count the vote totals for who cast votes for Republicans, remember, Georgia, okay, let me just go back a little bit. Georgia, every state has its own ways of electing senators. Every state has its own election laws that vary from state to state. And I also want to remind people that until 1913, most states elected their senators from the legislature. Voters got no say in it other than to elect their state legislatures. So here we are in Georgia. Their laws say you can have as many people run as can qualify for whatever rules there are to qualify. And we're going to pick the best of breed from the top 2 and do a runoff election if nobody breaks the 50% mark. Well, for both of the elections they ran for Senate, because one was a special election and one was a regular election, nobody broke the 50% mark. So they're going to have 8 elections on January 5th. 2 of those are going to be for both of their senators. What this means is that everybody who voted in Georgia is going to have a chance to vote again for their senators. Now, how do we help? Let me go over the numbers first. If you counted all of the Democratic votes that voted for all the Democratic voters, and you
All the Democratic candidates.
The Democratic candidates for Senate, and you counted all the Republican votes for all the Republican candidates, there were more Democratic votes cast. There just happened to be more Democratic candidates. Now there's only going to be 1 and 1. One Republican, one Democrat for each Senate seat. If everybody turned out that voted ahead of time, or that voted before, and does it again, we win. This is a winnable race.
Oh, very much so.
It's going to take a lot of effort.
That's true of both races, John Ossoff and who's the other guy?
Yeah.
It is, yeah. I mean, I did this by hand.
Purdue
About 5 hours ago.
and Leslie, I can't remember.
It was Purdue and Ossoff and Loeffler and a bunch
Republicans,
of cast of others, but Warnock was the clear Democratic leader.
Right. Black pastor. He's a black pastor.
Of the Ebenezer
so he has a
Baptist
leg
Church.
up in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, he's the pastor at Martin Luther King's church.
Right.
So anyway,
Raphael Warnock is his name.
Yeah, this is very winnable. I think what we need to do, and I haven't discerned yet where the best way to spend your money is, but I think all of us should at least go out and spend whatever we can, and not to use.
Do not give it to the DNC.
Line.
That's what you can do to really help, because
it may be the Georgia party.
You give it directly to the candidates.
I give it to the candidates, give it to the Georgia party, and give it to the DNC if you can.
Well, my friends that I have in Atlanta do not want the DNC involved in these elections. They look at it as they will handle this themselves. They know how to get people across the line. They do not need Nancy Pelosi. And
this is, of course, what's wrong with the party. Is there are always these backstabbers like the people you're talking about, who come to the party and then, we don't want we're not proud of the rest of the party. It's a whole nother thing, but let's get into it here.
Well, these are my black friends. and they work for Stacey Abrams, so I think they do have, carry some weight with their opinion.
Right.
And I don't mean,
I'm not saying you're not right. I'm just saying that's what's wrong with the Democratic Party. We had Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who was chastised by moderate Democrats for what they believed was her harming the Senate chances. Now, whether or not that's true, or whether or not she was just demonized in the way women are, Democratic women are always demonized, the fact is her response to that was to come out the next day and say the Democratic Party is broken. Well, the Democratic Party is not broken because liberals didn't prevail. The liberals didn't prevail, and this has been my problem as a liberal my entire life, and certainly it's true for progressives, is because we didn't recruit enough liberals. That's why we're not in charge. It's not because the party failed or the party didn't make everybody be liberal. It's not because the party is broken, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. It's because you need to do some more recruitment. I need to do some more recruitment. All of us need to recruit more liberals. And then it will be a liberal party. Sorry. Rant off. Back to the election in
my
Georgia.
point is that in Georgia, you had Stacey Abrams and a lot of the black organizations that, they were on the ground and they got votes out, and it made a difference.
It totally made a difference.
And we can talk about AOC in another one because I've got some opinions about her also. But there is this tension between the older, for whatever lack of another pejorative, the corporate Democrats and the younger crowd like AOC that are saying, we'd really like to have a world to live in that's not on fire, and we'd like health care that you don't have to be scared out of your mind to go into an emergency room, that you're going to be bankrupt. So they've got legitimate things that they're offering. I think AOC's got some growing up to do and learning, real politics. But I still look at her. She's the future of the party, whether you like it or not.
I don't think she is. I think she's not the future of the party in the same way that Bernie Sanders was not the future of the party. They are similar folks. You know, they say good things, fail at doing them, and then backshoot their allies. But,
I think what we learned in this
and I think what I'm saying, the reason I was so reactive about the people in Georgia is all we have to do is all decide to be proud of each other. The moderates who are chastising her need to decide to be proud of her. The people in Georgia need to decide to be proud of all the other Democrats in the country. And those of us who are old liberals need to be proud of young liberals.
I agree with that. I mean, there does need to be some unity. You know,
Right.
I think, and this is a topic for another show because we really do need to talk about the liberal, progressive, democratic fight ahead. That is going to be a real thing. But right now, going back to Georgia, it is getting out every single voter who voted before.
All hands on deck.
And bring their friends who didn't vote the first time. And I think it's a simple message of if you really want Biden and Kamala to do what they're going to do, you got to
have the Senate
vote again. And the votes are there. They are there.
Just FYI, you can register to vote in Georgia until December 7th. So if you want to move to someplace in Georgia and register to vote, that's the day. So.
Now that's dedication.
Okay, I want to point that out, though. I mean, this is a thing. Saying that we have to register again, is that what they have said?
No. It's like for what you're pointing out that there's voters that haven't registered, but they can register and vote. So no, once you're registered, you get to vote. But if you're looking for additional voters, somebody that hasn't registered, they've got till December 7th to register. So you can go get more voters.
It's interesting to me that when you look at the vote totals, and everybody can go to the website, and they've probably been updated since I wrote these down, more people voted for Biden so far than they did for either of the Democratic candidates. And let's take away the special election. When you look at the Ossoff-Perdue race, more people voted for Biden than they voted for Ossoff. And that just shows, again, the ridiculousness of where we are and the understanding of people and how politics actually work.
Well, you got to understand that in Georgia, they've got that system as a way to make sure that minority and black candidates do not win. That way,
these things are deliberate.
It's very deliberate, and it was set up to make sure that you didn't have a black candidate that's being backed by the black churches and comes in with 40% of the vote, which is more than any white candidate. And they know that they can let the white guys fight it out. Then the top one will take on the minority candidate, and then they'll come in and win when everybody rallies around the white candidate. And so, I mean, it was very purposeful and very overt. It was done. They weren't trying to hide anything.
And
right,
yet,
and that's not. That's always been. It used to be Democrats doing it. Now it's Republicans doing it. But it's always white people doing it.
And yet, Raphael Warnock, the black candidate for one of the Senate seats, got more votes than anybody else in that race.
Right. And I'm more skeptical of that we're going to be able to win these seats, but whether or not we can win them or whether or not you believe you can win them doesn't mean you shouldn't try.
Absolutely.
I'm still going to be doing everything I can do to make this happen, and I think you should too, even if, like me, you are skeptical that we can pull it off in Georgia. Georgia is the Georgia on my mind, Ray Charles,
like that
romantic place that we can never quite, seal the deal. So, but it's coming closer, and I think in the next election we can certainly do it. In 4 years, I mean, that's where you've got voters. We will certainly have a much more liberal group to work with. It's the best time, really, for liberals. You heard me complaining about how we don't do our job recruiting, which I really think is fundamental. But it's the best time going forward. This new generation is the most like the 70s since the 70s. So if you combine old hippies like me and people in between, whatever they are, I'm not sure what those Gen Xers are, but you guys can tell me, along with the very young folks, it's an unbeatable force going forward for maybe 50 years, maybe 100 years. Who knows?
Absolutely. And
it's a force against racism. It's a force against murder by police. We're all on the same page about these things. We need to be proud of each other's contribution. We need to work together. And we need to turn around, point your fire outside the party. I don't give a shit who you are.
That's
Point your
wise.
fire outside the party, because that's where the real danger of the real enemy exists.
Wise words.
So, another thing that I think we need to do, if we done talking about Georgia, feel like?
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, we'll come back to it, I'm sure, between
Yeah.
now and January 5th. So.
At least one.
We'll have more time. There'll be more time to discuss this issue on a future show.
Key point,
I think-
folks. Georgia. Just remember it.
Yes, I think that one of our key goals and things we need to work really hard on now that we have a president in power who's a decent person is we really need to push him to punish the foreign actors who were involved in Trump's ascension.
Oh, yeah.
And of
Oh,
course,
yeah.
number one, that's Russia. But it's
so I-
also Saudi Arabia.
I-
These Saudis are like our worst friend. It's like
They've been that way since 9/11.
Yeah.
The ones were
9/11.
Saudis that flew those planes.
Yeah.
They
Right.
weren't Iraqis, or Kurds or whoever. They were
17 of the
Saudis.
19 hijackers came from Saudi Arabia and were funded from Saudi Arabian sources.
right.
And I know way more about this than I can really talk about, but I will certainly say that, I don't know what we did to suppress foreign intervention in our voting systems. I suspect that there are a number of smoking mainframes in 3 major countries and probably a few others that we had something to do with, but I can't say. However, the reality is that, and we called this again a couple of weeks ago, the most dangerous time is not the election. It is now. It is in the next 71 days that we have.
We're down to 70 days now.
70 days that we have left until inauguration. And what we're seeing, and this is terrible to say, but let's talk about these lawsuits. Let's talk about Trump not conceding. It is all about right now calling into question our election system and the election itself. The objective facts are that of all the lawsuits that have been filed, I think all but 2 have been dismissed summarily. And maybe more at this point. Maybe they all have. I don't know. Maybe a couple more.
I have some other news on
win.
that. Yeah, there have been 7. They've all been dismissed, but now they're filing new ones. And one of them was in Pennsylvania, claiming that this postal worker knew of election fraud happening at the post office.
Oh, by the way, that postal worker, I saw the news flash. That postal worker has recanted their story. Yeah, exactly.
Steal my thunder, okay?
Well,
Jeez.
I'll tell you right
got
now, I
one
think
bit
that's more
breaking news
of
to
a
talk about
beltway media thing. Out here, I think everybody's looked at it that, even my most right-wing friends, that in fact, one I talked to today, it's over, and I mean,
Right.
it's like, I just want to make sure that there was no voter fraud. And it's like, I was,
That's
this
horseshit.
was my roommate in college, and that's what I said, horseshit. Show me one.
Well,
don't
the other
give me
thing
these
that they're
generalizations.
saying-
Show me one.
The
One.
other thing that they're saying is, Trump needs a while to get his head around it, and we just need to give him the space.
Yeah.
We all feel sorry for poor Trump, who,
Okay.
probably cheated his way into the White House the first time and, wasn't able to cheat his way in the second time. I don't feel sorry for the guy. These guys are just making an excuse. The Republicans in Congress, prominent Republicans around the country, are just making an excuse because they're afraid of these redneck cracker voters.
Exactly.
Well, they're afraid of the voters, and also they think that Trump is going to stay in control of the party for the next 4 years.
And he's already said that he's going
Well, he can only do that if
run
he
in
keeps those
2024.
voters.
Well, it's going to be very difficult to maintain control of the party from Leavenworth, and you have to get the warden's permission to make a Zoom call.
Well, even if he's doing it from Mar-a-Lago, I think that he, everybody, I don't think they underestimate. I think everybody underestimates the diminished power of a loser. And I think Trump certainly, if he thinks he's got a future, does it. I think these other guys who are saying stuff like that, they're just lying. They're afraid of those voters because those voters are irrational and gullible and racist. And they, combine this volatile personality. And let's stop blaming the Republican Party for their voters. Blame the Republican voters, for their party, and you'll have a more accurate thing. Stop pretending like these are nice people who've been fooled. These aren't nice people. They haven't been fooled. There are people who like Trump because he represents them. He's the same person.
That I read today, and that makes a whole lot of sense when you look at it from the bigger picture. We had Mitch McConnell come out yesterday and say, well, Trump should absolutely pursue the lawsuits and legal actions that he's got available to him. And I don't entirely disagree, but why is he saying that? And it has, I think, everything to do with the Senate race in Georgia. He's trying to rile up the fuckwits down there and get them activated so that they'll turn out again and vote for the 2 Republican Senate candidates. And he doesn't really give a shit about what happens after that. He just wants a majority in the Senate.
Well, I mean, you can tell his heart's not in it. And when you look at what's going on with Trump's personal finances, I don't know if you saw today, but he put his personal helicopter up for sale today because he's so cash strapped. He's having to unload assets to pay bills. You know, I mean, it's like
that was the helicopter that he'd only trotted out like 5 times a year so he could pretend to make a rich man's entrance.
Yeah, absolutely. But the thing is that he, once he's gone, he is literally staring into the face of hundreds of civil lawsuits, and they're going to be the prosecutors in New York and the state of New York are not going to drop the criminal investigations for the very reason, if they did, it would look like they were doing a political witch hunt. So they're like, they have to go through with these now. And
we all know that lawyers have an ego, right?
No.
All these guys who believe that Trump is guilty all want to be the one to get him.
And let's
they want to make their bones on Trump.
We need to remind our viewers that yes, Biden or Pence or anybody else or whoever is actually president at the time can pardon Trump for federal crimes, but they can't pardon him for state crimes.
Of which there are many.
And Ed, you said earlier he can't govern from Leavenworth.
Well, that's only for federal, if he gets federal. Otherwise, it's Attica.
That's exactly what I was going to say. You stole my
That's a way worse place. You want to go fed, not state.
If you want to take his line next, you're good to go. We've done the full circle.
Right. Yeah, in Maryland, they just took down the old prison in Jessup, and they used to call it the Cut.
And, really?
Yeah, it was a fairly bleak place.
Yeah, I mean, most of these places are, which is why prison movies are all, cut from the same cloth.
Right, which is a whole nother thing, prison reform. But I want to go back to the thing about Russia. And I'm wondering what steps you guys think we can take to punish Russia for what they have done to us.
Well, I here's off the top of my head. What we know has really hurt Russia and Putin the most are these very personal sanctions about their wealth and moving their wealth around. Because by some estimates, Putin may be the wealthiest man in the world. He's certainly in the top 10. I think that's
when you're robbing an entire country, you can get that way.
And the people that brought him there have made out like bandits as well, literally. So stopping their ability to move money around and to spend their money and to get access to their money has really hurt them and pissed them off, and was a lot of the animus that caused them to act against HRC in 2016. Yes, we need to continue to do that, but I think there are certainly more active measures on the cyber warfare side, for one, that we can take. I mean, let's be realistic. Russia is not nearly the world power they used to be back when we were kids. If you take the entire GDP of Russia, it does not quite equal New York City's.
Right. Their entire power comes from these cyber operations, which they don't just do to us. They do to France. They do to Italy. They interfere in elections all around Europe.
The only reason we pay attention to Russia is because they've got 6,000 nukes on top of missiles.
Right.
If they didn't have that, they would be just another second or third world hellhole.
And they may not, because if, it's true of other authoritarian dictatorships, that stuff, wears out over time. Those rockets require a lot of maintenance and a lot of money spent. And Putin's spending money on himself. He may very well not be. He's spending money on paint jobs for those missiles, but I'm not sure he's spending what is really required.
Well, I mean, it's like one of the intelligence, they showed some of these in Polyarny, the ships, and I mean, they were all tied together, just rusting hulks.
Yeah, because they don't have the money to either maintain them or make them operational. Let me point out another thing that we can do, and that is to reinforce and rebuild our relationship with NATO. That is, for Russia especially, that is the number one threat, and that is the thing that we have used for 70 years now, I think, to keep them in check. And Trump systematically tried to dismantle that. The relationships are certainly damaged. But if you see the responses from our European allies to Biden's victory, we can rebuild that. I'm pretty damn sure, because we need them as much as they need us.
Right. The idea that, what Trump, our former idiot in chief, I guess he's still our idiot in chief. What he doesn't understand is that we support NATO. So if war comes, it'll happen over there.
Right.
The whole idea is if war comes, we want to stop it in Europe before it gets to the United States. And that's the reason for NATO.
Well,
we're the big beneficiaries.
That's where you're going to have to educate younger voters that don't realize just, what happened in the crucible of World War II. It happened over there. You destroyed, entire cities, entire countries. The reason that we spend more of our money keeping military there, and they're not contributing their fair share, is so that we don't get our country blown to smithereens. Just like you said, Jimmy, it happens there. It doesn't come over here. And that's part of the educational process to all the voters that, there's a reason why we're doing this. It's like it's anything that's prophylactic. You're spending money up front so that something bad doesn't happen. And it's a hard argument for a lot of people to say, well, why should I spend money on something that might not happen? Well, the fact that it didn't happen is what the outcome that you wanted.
Right.
And so to get back to where NATO is going to be valuable, you've got a big process of educating voters.
I'm glad we are coming up on the end of our show on this point, because it really gets to something that is near and dear to my heart, particularly at this moment. And, you see my poppy, sorry, got to point to it in the right direction here. You see my poppy. Tonight is the Marine Corps birthday in 1975 on the 10th of November at the Little Tun Tavern in Philadelphia. Major Nichols started recruiting Marines for service on the U.S. Navy ships. And you think about that. And then tomorrow, of course, on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, the guns fell silent. Sorry, a little emotional here.
That's okay, Devil Dog.
I'm not a Marine. I've heard of the Marines. I know Marines, and I admire them. But we all together, the green, the blue, the light blue, and the dark blue, we all make a purple force, and that's.
That was a force against fascism.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, and the original Antifa. Go figure.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So, God bless the United States Marines, Semper Fi, and God bless America, and all of the veterans. And I'm not trying to be self-serving, but all of the folks who went out and did what they were asked to do, and more.
Yes. Absolutely. Happy Veterans Day, everyone. So that's our show. We'll be back next week with more ranting and raving, more cussing and moaning. So tune in for another Street Fight Politics. And as we said, big shout out to all of our veterans today.
Happy Veterans Day, guys.
God bless.